Today is the third Sunday after Easter. Epistle from the first epistle of St. Peter the Apostle. Dear beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims to refrain yourselves from carnal desires, which war against the soul, having your conversation good among the Gentiles, that whereas they speak against you as evildoers, they may, by the good works which they shall behold in you, glorify God in the day of visitation. Be ye subject, therefore, to every human creature for God's sake, whether it be to the king as excelling, or to governors as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of the good. For so is the will of God, that by doing well you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free, and not as making liberty a cloak for malice, but as the servants of God. Honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the froward. For this is thankworthy before God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Continuation of the Holy Gospel according to St. John. At that time Jesus said to his disciples, "A little while, and now you shall not see me, and yet a little while, and you shall see me, because I go to the Father." Then some of his disciples said one to another, "What is this he saith to us, a little while, and you shall not see me, and again a little while, and you shall see me, and because I go to the Father?" They said therefore, "What is this that he saith, a little while? We know not what he speaketh." And Jesus knew that they had a mind to ask him. And he said to them, "Of this do you inquire among yourselves? Because I said, a little while, and you shall not see me, and again a little while, and you shall see me? Amen, I say to you, that you shall lament and weep, but the world shall rejoice. And you shall be made sorrowful, but your sorrow shall be turned into joy. A woman, when she is in labor, hath sorrow, because her hour is come. But when she hath brought forth the child, she remembereth no more the anguish, for joy that a man is born into the world. So also you now indeed have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart shall rejoice, and your joy no man shall take from you." For any assistance, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta turibus, benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostre. Amen.
This Friday, May 8th, is the feast of Mary, Mediatrix of all graces. So I'll talk about this Marian feast day and this title, how to explain that in Catholic terms. First of all, a quote from Pope Pius XII. He said, "Mary now reigns in heaven, together with her Son as Queen. Jesus is King by nature, as the Son of God, and by his merit. Through him and with him, but subordinate to him, Mary is Queen by divine relationship, as Mother of God, and through her merits. Her kingdom is as extensive as that of her Son, since nothing escapes her authority." End of quote. As the sacred author of Dogmatic Theology for the Lady explains, since her assumption into heaven, Mary has been elevated to this position of treasurer and dispenser, or mediatrix of all graces, for Christ's kingdom on earth. She has a sovereign influence upon everything that happens on earth. In heaven, she is queen of the angels and saints, who honor her as the mother of God. Towards men on earth, Mary's queenship has nothing overpowering or arrogant about it. It is warm, compassionate motherhood. Subjection to such a queen is our privilege and sure confidence. Just as Christ sits at the right hand of the Father, his mother sits at the right hand of her Son. Now, calling Mary the Queen of Heaven is a problem for some Protestants, because they say the Bible explicitly condemns practices that involve a, quote, Queen of Heaven. And they get this quote from Jeremiah chapter 7, verses 17 to 18. And we'll quote that right now to see what they're talking about. It says, "Seest thou not what they do in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? The children gather wood, and the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead the dough to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to offer libations to strange gods, and to provoke me to anger." End of quote. Now, Protestants say that not only is calling Mary Queen of Heaven equivalent to worshiping her as a goddess, but the Bible explicitly tells us that this title is evil, as we just quoted. But this is not true. As one Catholic apologist explained, the prophet Jeremiah, in this quotation, is not condemning the idea of a Queen of Heaven, but rather the worshiping of a pagan goddess that took place in the streets of Jerusalem hundreds of years before the time of Christ. Now, it's not clear which pagan goddess Jeremiah was referring to. The nearby ancient world had many of them. Regardless, Jeremiah is condemning a particular act of worship of such a deity. The Jews were burning incense and pouring out libations to this Queen of Heaven, this pagan goddess, as they were doing for other idols and false gods as well. And this infidelity, this mortal sin against the faith on the part of his people, provoked God's anger and wrath to be poured out on the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem. Nonetheless, Catholics, referring to Our Lady as Queen of Heaven, are not worshiping Mary as a deity in place of the one God. Instead, we are venerating her for the exalted position she holds among all creatures by virtue of her being the mother of the Savior. And this idea of giving special honor or veneration is definitely biblical. When we study, for example, 1 Timothy 5:17, 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 12 to 13, and Psalm 44, verse 18. Our Lady holds a position of grandeur by reason of her attributes and titles. As Mother of God, free from sin, full of grace, ever virgin, and Queen of Heaven. And this personal grandeur is immeasurably heightened by her work on earth. She participated in the redemption of mankind in union with her Son, Jesus Christ. As Pope Benedict explains, Pope Benedict the 15th, back in the 1920s, he said, "Together with Christ, Mary has redeemed the human race." End of quote. And for this reason, Pope Pius XI called her, quote, co-redemptrix. Pius XII called her affiliatrix of the Redeemer. Mary proved to be such a helpmate, first of all, in the beginning of the work of redemption, by giving birth to the Redeemer, and then at its end, by sharing in the sacrifice of the cross. Let's explain, first of all, the beginning, the first part. Our Lady played a decisive role in our redemption by her free consented incarnation of the Redeemer. As we read in St. Luke's Gospel, an angel was sent by God to Nazareth, to a virgin called Mary. in order to respectfully request that she take the Son of God, who is coming into the world to redeem mankind, into her womb as a tiny child. With all the rank and glory of a prince of heaven, the archangel Saint Gabriel asks the humble virgin for her consent. And Our Lady feels free to refuse this request, and this is evidenced by the first question she asked the angel, out of love for virginity. It must also be clear that God would not accomplish this miracle of divine motherhood in her without her express permission. It is true that God, who from all eternity knows all the free decisions of every human will, he knew in advance that the Blessed Mother would actually give her fiat, but it is also true that Mary's decision was obviously prepared by grace, but always with the proviso that her will remain free. Thus it was through her consent that she gave us a Redeemer and introduced the work of redemption. Our Blessed Mother had long been accustomed to do God's will in all things. Here also, at this moment, she meant only to be the handmaid of the Lord. Yet she gave her consent not out of cold obedience, but rather in ardent love, even though she knew in advance that her motherhood would be the source of great suffering. God the Father had offered his Son in love, and Mary lovingly received him as her child and opened her heart to him. The second part. Mary's cooperation in Christ's incarnation was a contribution to our redemption. She cooperated even more in our salvation when she stood beneath the cross on Calvary. Since the time Jesus was a child, Our Lady had realized that the redemption of mankind was to be achieved by suffering. When Jesus was only 40 days old, Simeon had prophesied that a sword would pierce her immaculate heart. Now her son was hanging in agony on the cross. Of all the people standing under the cross at the time of Christ's death, the Blessed Virgin Mary was certainly the only one who, by her inner enlightenment and by her son's prior instructions, recognized Jesus' death and suffering in the light of salvation. A sacrificial death for all mankind. Between mother and son, there was a union of will and suffering. And she joined in the sacrifice as she offered her child, the dearest and most sacred of her possessions, with indescribable sorrow for the salvation of the whole world. And renouncing her maternal rights, she had offered her son as a sacrificial gift to the Eternal Father for the sins of all mankind. Our Lady frequently cooperated in the redemptive work of her son and was in a way the cause of our salvation. Now we're ready to explain the Mediatrix of all graces, this title or dispenser of all graces. On earth, Our Lady cooperated intimately in the mystery of our redemption. And since her assumption into heaven, she applies the graces of redemption through her intercession. Pope Leo XIII states that just as Mary once helped in the completion of the work of redemption, so now she assists in the distribution of the fruits of redemption. Now the other saints also intercede with God in heaven for us, but Mary's intercession transcends that of all the other saints. Her intercession is that of the Mother of God, whereas the other saints are only friends of God. It may be even said that the prayers of the other saints have to be supported by the prayer of the Mother of God in order to be heard. As one theologian said, what the others intercede for, they somehow intercede for through Mary. She is the dispenser of all grace. Now, this does not mean, however, that we would receive neither help nor grace from God if we do not explicitly call upon the Blessed Virgin Mary. The Blessed Virgin Mary, in her motherly love for us, will intercede for us without request, and for those who do not even believe in her or her divine Son. In fact, it is precisely for such people that she, in her maternal mercy, often intercedes. Take, for example, in Carlsbad, Bohemia, there's a memorial tablet honoring Our Lady, and on it is inscribed the following words, quote, "Even though you no longer believe in her and no longer pray to her, she still helps you. If you do not formally pray, your misery and suffering prays for you, and our Holy Mother Mary sees all this." End of quote. The significance of the title Dispenser or Mediatrix of all graces can be summarized in the following words. Mary's motherly love embraces all mankind, and God fulfills her every request. We may further state that God, not bound by any internal necessity, but simply to honor his Blessed Mother, decreed in his providential plan to distribute all graces through the Blessed Mother. Without her intercession, no one receives any supernatural help. And this is not a new doctrine. Let's take, for example, back in the 4th century, St. Ephrem, a doctor of the church, who died in 373. He addresses Mary in these words, quote, "My mistress, dispenser of all good things, mediatrix for the whole world," end of quote. Another one, Father of the Church, Bishop Germanus of Constantinople, who died in 733, he says in a sermon, quote, "No one achieves salvation excepting through thee, O most holy one. No one receives a gift of grace excepting through thee, O purest one." End of quote. And one more, just to give 3 examples, from St. Bernard of Clairvaux, who died in the year 1090. He gives us this warm and beautiful assurance, quote, "God wants us to honor this virgin, and thus he has entrusted her with the fullness of his graces. Whatever we possess of hope, grace, and salvation, without a doubt, comes from her. Let us indeed seek grace, but let us seek grace through Mary. God wanted us to have nothing that did not pass through Mary's hands." End of quote. From St. Bernard of Clairvaux. And many great preachers and other saints speak in much the same way. All the popes from Leo XIII to Pius XII say the same thing. No gift of grace comes to us excepting through Mary. All divine help comes to us through her. She is the treasure of all graces. And that is why Pope Benedict XV, in the year 1921, instituted the feast of Mary, Mediatrix of all graces. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.